Welcome to the Innovating with the DoD panel. We will begin shortly. Pete Poorman is a Director of Corporate Relations for the School of Engineering and Computer Science at the University of Texas at Dallas, where he connects companies with resources and research capabilities of the university. He joined the university in 2013 from the computer industry, where he held engineering, product management, and marketing roles in companies ranging from technology startups to the very largest firms. Pete holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from UT Dallas. Please welcome Pete Poorman.
Well, good afternoon or good morning if you might be in a different time zone. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the Innovating with the DoD panel. Here, as part of Mission Innovation, we hear directly from DoD's programs that reach out to small companies and entrepreneurs on how they view that engagement and how they make it easy for you to work with the DoD. And if we could add the panel added, please. All right, so it's my pleasure to have with us Art Trevethan, representing the Army Application Lab, Alex Goldberg, who is here representing the Air Force, and Captain Ben Buskirk from the Navy. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here today. What we'd like to do is take just a few minutes for each of you to talk briefly about your programs and how your branch engages with the entrepreneurs in our community. And then we will open to discussion amongst ourselves and, of course, in response to questions from our audience. So with that, we'll go in alphabetical order by first name, I guess. So we'll go with Alex, if you'd introduce us, please, to your programs.
Yeah, no, pleasure, Pete, to be with everyone here. I mean, a great panel with you. And it was great to hear from Dave Goldfein, who, one of my heroes, who was an inspiration throughout my Air Force career and continues to be one. Big picture, my background is flying F-16s and MQ-1s, MQ-9s, a couple thousand hours of combat, been in the innovation ecosystem for quite some time. Was recently a U.S. Air Force Chief of Staff of the Air Force DARPA Fellow at the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. Was the former director of the Texas Military Department Joint Innovation Unit, and currently I am the Southwestern Regional Lead for DIU, which is all about taking commercial technology and rapidly fielding it within the DoD. And I wanted to provide a little bit of context here, just real briefly, about why we're all here today. From listening to the panels that went on yesterday and today, and from everything that was going on, the big picture is, what is the problem that we are all trying to solve, right? All of these innovation units, industry partners, academia, all coming together. It can be summed up very quickly by General Hyten, who really talked to us about the thing that he fears the most was not necessarily a near-peer competitor like China or Russia or Iran or North Korea, but in reality, it is about the need to move fast, and that many of our near-peer competitors are moving faster than us in space and hypersonics and counter-hypersonics, and now in taking commercial technology and fielding it faster than we are. That's why DIU was created 5 years ago, right? To help us move faster by leveraging the commercial technology. Right back in the 50s, for every dollar we had in research and development, industry maybe had 50 cents. Now, for every $1 we have in R&D, it's the Googles, the Apples, the Facebooks, the private equity venture capital community that now brings in $11. And if you look specifically at artificial intelligence, it's like $100 to 1. And so it's not just about leveraging our labs, who back in the day created everything from GPS to stealth to the internet. I mean, it was fantastic. But a lot of the disruptive technologies and where DIU really focuses in these portfolios that have this dual use technology, such as artificial intelligence, autonomy, cyber, space, human systems, and now our newest portfolio, advanced energy and material. From the Secretary of Defense, right, we are that innovation unit that goes across the services, right, to help, right, Ben at Naval X, and Art at the Army Applications Lab, and Colonel Diller from AFWorks, and be able to help scale a lot of their wins, as well as take on projects that at the OSD level, at the Office of Secretary of Defense, we can help change policy, right? Help change and lower the barriers to entry. First was about contracting, whether a CSO process to be able to get people on contract, companies on contract in 60 to 90 days, commercial prices, commercial time speeds. And so that's what this is about, right? It's about, right, moving faster. The other element is about a cultural change, right? Cultural change historically has been hard to work with the DoD. And so really the mission and one of the elements of DIU is to be able to tackle some of those barriers, whether it's contracting, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's international, expansion to our coalition partners. These are all the ways in which we bring to bear. We have a website, diu.mil, where we have these solicitations that we are looking for the latest and greatest technologies that are out there, working with our government partners who have problems. And we put those problems online for industry partners to be able to work with us, alongside us, and moving at the speed of relevance. So that's just a high-level overview, Pete. Pleasure to be here with the rest of the team.
Alex, and thank you so much. And thank you for straightening me out on DIU versus Air Force. I apologize for pigeonholing you in one service only, when in fact you have across the entire DoD level of oversight and responsibility. Thank you again for being here. Again, continuing alphabetical by first name. I could have used second letter of first name, perhaps.
Yeah.
Art, if you'd go ahead and tell us what you're doing.
Sure thing. I don't want to echo what Stoichi just said. He very eloquently puts some of the problems that we encounter being a DoD innovation unit, where he's focused on DoD problems in general. The Army Applications Lab is focused on Army problems that start with a sponsor and move through the process. But beyond that, not only are we solving Army problems, we're trying to solve the hidden problem, which is the reluctance of small businesses to want to work with a DoD partner because of the traditional nature of long contracting periods. That refers directly to what Alex was just talking about as far as some of the contracting tools. With the culture, it is a culture shift that we are enabling within the Army as far as how do we do business so that we are better able to take advantage of today's true solvers, which are those companies that are smaller and have not done business with the government before, so that we can bring technology of 2021 to the modern warfare instead of technology from the 70s. And we also have aal.army, so we publish our problems as well.
Terrific. I love these short URLs that people can actually type from hearing them rather than having to
absolutely
find the link later. Thank you very much, Art, and we look forward to talking more about how those specific programs work. Ben, last but certainly not least, if you'd tell us a little bit about what's going on with Naval X.
Hey, thanks for having me. So I've been at Naval X for about a month. Career naval aviator. After command, I went to SecDef Executive Fellowship at VMware in Palo Alto. After a year in Silicon Valley, stood up the OpNav Warfighting Innovation Cell, and now just taking over Naval X. Naval X is one of the younger of the organizations, so I sort of have the luxury of getting to be a second mover by working with these guys and figuring out what works and what doesn't. But the bottom line is we're looking to connect the operational art plus tactical proficiency, plus the commercial creativity that all of you guys bring to the table. Naval X was initially stood up on how do we connect the workforce and change the culture. And we do that by creating a platform, which we did with our TechBridge network, which we have almost everywhere except Texas. And I know the guys from the Capital Factory tell me that all the time. But it's a how do we connect each other both physically and also digitally. And then the next newest initiative that we have is now we have to guide our stakeholders to delivering capability. Because you can change culture or try to change culture, but what we believe is that you change culture by getting wins. Elon Musk tried to change culture for a long time, but when he started, the rocket started launching, people started listening, and now we're learning from him. And so we're looking to guide our stakeholders to winning. And so really our vision, and this is aspirational, is to really use the whole defense innovation ecosystem to deliver capability on time every time. And that involves everyone here. one of our, and I have our website in there, I think it's kind of exciting to me is part of this answering the question is how do you even know where to start and get into the market? We created a digital engagement platform, which is a total MVP. And I say that because I want to get your insights. So please go check it out and let me know if it's useful or not. Particularly, we're setting up communities of interest around, it can be technology, can be around subjects, where you can engage with us, and then we can bring in our folks from the OpNav staff, our resource sponsors, and our folks from the fleet, and we can really have a place where these conversations can happen. And then NavalX can come in and between us and our tech bridges, guide solutions, from capability need to the service providers and the capabilities that you guys bring to the table, and both non-traditional and traditional. So it's really great to be here. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
Well, terrific, and thank you very much, Ben. So I heard a couple of terms in some of those conversations that may be a little foreign to our audience. I heard service provider, I heard provider. Those may not be roles that people are used to defining. Can you guys talk a little bit about what a provider might be in this interaction?
I can go ahead. Want me to start it off?
Yeah, I'll pick on Ben, please.
Okay, so we get that all the time at NavalX because unlike AFWorks, I don't have contracting authority and I don't have program managers. We were stood up as more of a bootstrapping model where Secretary Gert said, hey, what we want you to do is one, connect folks, and then to help build the deal with the right stakeholders in the room. It's oftentimes what we see is there's a solution. Say you've got something that the fleet wants, you got somebody in the fleet that says, I want this, but I'm not going to make that deal for you. NavalX doesn't have that authority, but we do have convening authority because I report directly to the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for research, development, and acquisition. So what I'm doing is I'm providing a service for you, providing a platform, and then we'll go in and help build the deal is what we do. But that is something that's different between us and some of the others is I don't cut the check, but I know the people who cut the checks, and we'll go help find those people to cut the checks, along with going, hey, what do you have, and how can we find a problem solver, a high-level problem solver that I can go say, hey, if we get the solution in, will you buy it on the back end? Because like all of us have said here, I learned from my time in industry that we have to get you across the valley of death, and it doesn't do any good to say, hey, here's just a snippet, a phase one, without having that solution provider on the back end. So that's where I see our role.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on Ben's comments there. DIU 1.0 was all about looking and finding technology, right? This is the first foray into building those relationships, inspiring, engaging, supporting industry and academia in ways not previously seen, right? The bureaucracy in the DoD is strong. And bureaucracy is great in that it perpetuates what works, but when what works no longer works, it's very difficult to change. And so when we started going after the technology, right, the hammer, and then looking for a nail, that particular model is very difficult. Organically to DIU, we don't have a tremendous amount of capital. We are very much like what Ben says, right? We are a matchmaker, a party planner, a herder of cats, right? And so we have the ability to connect from the programs of record that have problems to solution providers, right, in industry that may previously have not wanted to work with the DoD. And our goal is to help them navigate that bureaucracy and that challenge, right? Walk beside them to, through what is, predominantly a very scary path, right? Different books, different regulations, cybersecurity, right? Different policies. And so one of those things that we're able to provide now is we have a team, a defense engagement team that focuses throughout the joint forces, those people that have problems, right? In the trained men equipped within the DoD, we look for those people that have a mandate to equip and they have the money to do so. And so that we can help them cross the valley of the shadow of death from understanding what is the realm of the possible. Because we start with, an RFI, previous contracting, we go out there and typically the same 5 defense primes now bid on everything. Nowadays, right, to be able to tap in and to leverage all of commercial industry and using these novel contracting mechanisms that we now have available, and now our own funding through the National Security Innovation Capital, which is our own fund within the Defense Innovation Unit to focus on hardware. We are that solution provider, helping change culture, helping change policy, helping with contracting and program management, and really being able to be an advocate to all of the other innovation units and tackle the challenges at the OSD level that is very difficult for any one particular service to tackle.
And to key off on what Alex was just saying, each individual organization has its own culture on top of where he's coming from, which is kind of an overall, right? So you have people who have been rewarded for years for doing things the right way. And I will tell you that does include the primes. There is a place for the primes because not everybody can crank out 100,000 units of something. If we go to a founder who has a great idea, they solve a problem for the Army, and then we bring them across the Valley of Death and we give them a contract for 100,000 units, that alone could kill them because they're not set up to be a manufacturing facility and we're asking them to do something they're not. So that connective tissue that we build by having these long-term relationships with primes, with large manufacturers, actually allows us to help bridge that area. If the small company wants to remain independent and license it off, if they want to grow and become a manufacturer, if they want to partner with someone, we can facilitate that. But it's all starting from the point of a problem that has been identified, that has a sponsor within a particular unit who has the money to pay for it to cross the valley.
So we've talked about money a couple of times, and if I summarize correctly, I heard from Ben that money comes from allocations or budgeted funds in other organizations within the Navy. Alex, I think you said something similar, though you alluded to a small amount of funds available directly in DIU for certain purposes. Art, is that what's working in AAL also, or is there a different story?
Slightly different, but probably evolving more towards where Alex is, in that we are a scrappy startup. We don't have funding to be able to put out. So we were set up 2 years ago to study the market, to find out what was going on out there, right? And, we heard several stories over and over again about access to funding. We don't want to do this. We do want to do that. So we actually designed our own program that is based upon small business funds, SBIR funds, but with our own spin on it to make it easier for the small company to come in and participate in those Army problems. Now, we do, crossing my fingers, hit the budget next year. So that will open up some additional opportunities. But so far, we've done quite a bit of business with SBIR. We've been able to take companies through and help them across the Valley of Death. So we do take that hand. It's not really hand-holding. It's more giving you a guidebook, giving you the tools to be able to understand the process and get through the process at the speed of business. Too many times we hear about, companies who start a process and then abandon it when they find out it's going to take 2 years to get their funding through, right? A small company, I'm an entrepreneur, unlike these great gentlemen here who have served the country. I spent my youth, didn't waste it, but was in startups, right? And so I've been doing startups for 25 years, some of them with the intent of providing services to the U.S. military. And I can tell you, when you have sponsorship for something and it goes to purchasing and they tell you this one's going to go quick, it'll only be 2.5 years. As a startup, you don't have that kind of runway, right? And understanding the place that these companies sit, they're not a prime. They don't have $1 billion in the bank. They can't wait out a funding cycle. You need to be able to react monetarily to the needs military.
Okay, so very good point there, Art, about speed. And we've had several questions come up about speed of acquisition processes and so on. But a term was used at least twice, Valley of Death. And, I first encountered Valley of Death from the National Science Foundation, where they were talking about the gap between invention and the development of a need. Here we have an existing need and an existing technology or product, and yet there's still a Valley of Death. Somebody tell us what Valley of Death you're referring to. Or I can volunteer my interpretation. You guys can fix me.
I'll take that off. When the military is coming from the perspective, and we say the valley of the shadow of death. What we mean is when we have a solution that we want and we want to purchase, the challenge of the policy and the way in which we do budgets are such that it's a 3-year process. The budget we are working on right now, the one that I literally put my Uber request for my food to arrive, right, won't show up for 3 years, right? The budget is 3 years from now. A company cannot wait that long. So what do I do when I did a prototype? I did some research and development. I've created this thing. The company hit every milestone, knocked it out of the park. This is going to revolutionize everything. And I don't have money. And Congress won't give me that money for 3 more years. There needs to be something that from the DIU perspective, from the Secretary of Defense, that we need to, right, work with our, congressional delegates, right, in Congress to be able to find other ways, other mechanisms, other means by which we can cross that valley of shadow of death. Now, we have looked at small business innovation research funds or funds that we currently have in year that we have the ability to reallocate to help cross that gap so that we can do some low rate production between now when we want the product and when the budget will actually arrive. And there's a number of ways to skin that cat, but that's really high level what we were trying to talk about. But I also want to put a little bit of another finer point here and take the discussion in another location. When I heard Dave Goldfein talk about, the stories that he went onto the flight lines and the impacts that he had with AFWorks, really at the core of everything that is going on is if you thought this was all about the technology, you've missed the point. This is really about not just a technology change. This is about, it could be an organizational change, a process change, a regulation or policy change that the valley of death and the shadow of death. It's not that the money's there. It's that we handcuff ourselves with different pots and colors of money and artificially restrict ourselves. I will tell you, China does not have these challenges that we self-inflict upon ourselves. At its core,
well, let's hope China
this is all about
challenges.
A cultural change. Yes. It's all about a cultural change. It is getting away from this compliance-driven, no because mindset. No, that's just not the way we've ever done it, that way before. Or, hey, because I am a general or because I have rank that I know better than the airman or soldier or guardian or marine or sailor on the flight line, on the ship, out on the edge, who understand the challenges, but the unique opportunities to really have an impact, right? And how do we get away from that no because mindset and more toward this problem solving, continual process improvement, never rest on our laurels? How do we get to yes, right? In the next, crisis or combat that we see in 2030, China will have a larger GDP. They will have a larger R&D budget. They will have a larger military budget. 40% of all STEM graduates will come from China, 3.6% from the United States. The reason why all these innovation units exist, right, and this cultural change that we're trying to solve and create a better, different incentive structure is because what works today will not work tomorrow. We've seen the simulations, we've run the numbers, we've done the research. It's not just because it's a better idea to do things better, faster, cheaper. And Ben and Art will attest to it. At the end of the day, it's not just about finding a better horse. Look, if we just tell our airmen and soldiers and seamen how to do everything, then how are we going to expect them to adapt, overcome, persevere, and win nonetheless in highly contested combat? Right? This is about peace and prosperity and to lift, right, that mankind across the globe. So I think more than anything, a lot of what we are trying to do is a cultural change and find that airman and soldier, right, that are on the flight line, out on the edge, who have great ideas and provide them the tools, the mentorship and resources, academia and industry. How do we give them access to people, facilities, equipment, funding, Sherpas to help them navigate through the bureaucracy? And that's really what we're passionate about.
Terrific. And Alex, the passion is obvious there. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's really inspirational. As we were talking about money, the term other approaches came up. And I would bet you that our audience has heard of other transaction authorities and OTAs. And people are probably kind of scratching their heads a little about what the heck an OTA is. Ben, maybe you could make a comment about that, or Art? Ben, what do you think?
You know what, I'll go ahead and, because I think Art could probably answer it better than me. I would give it a general one, but you've been in the business a little bit longer. So you want to take that one, Art?
Yeah, so there are many types of money that that you can get a hold of, and there are different regulations around each one of them. The OTAs, as far as the specifics, as far as how we're going to use them, I think we're still trying to define that right now. So, honestly, you've had a great focus on more the SBIR world for the time being. But my general understanding, and maybe, Alex, how much do you know about OTAs?
Yeah, so that's the bread and butter of DIU, actually.
Yeah.
So as the OTA authority, it is outside the FAR. So the Federal Acquisition Regulation is very, very, very large. And then, multiply that by 10. It is ginormous. Now, there are other ways, other contracting authorities that we have that are outside of the Federal Acquisition Regulation. And that's where the OTA fits in. And so DIU pioneered the commercial solutions offering. And what we are able to do is within 60 to 90 days from sitting down with the customer to getting on contract, we're able to do a prototype contract. And DIU doesn't prototype like building something new like DARPA. It's more from the DoD, it's a smarter way of buying. It's the ability to do a sample before we back the truck up and go right with a large purchase order. And this provides us, the ability to buy down risk, yet also be able to move right at the speed of business. So it's very flexible, commercial terms, IP is able to be negotiated. We have the ability that is unique to our contracting. All of our contractors are GS-15, NH-4s. I mean, they are very experienced. And now the CSO with OTA authority is available to all the other services as well. So that's just one of the mechanisms that DIU pioneered to lower the barriers to entry, but there are many more.
And to add on to what Alex said, a lot of this comes down to being able to apply creativity to those monies that are not a part of the POM, that are not a part of our budget, right? Because our budget is actually written out basically line by line. Here's what you can use this penny for. Not many people may realize that, but the budget is incredibly specific, and you cannot legally use the money for anything outside of what was done there. And that's why we talk about color of money, because different monies apply to different areas. So by using these outside vehicles, SBIR, by using OTA, and I'm sure there are other vehicles out there that allow us capability, we are applying that entrepreneurial creativity to how we deliver funding. I mean, I tell you, there's not an entrepreneur out there who hasn't had that, late in the week spasm of, oh my goodness, are the checks going to clear? And I will tell you, if we don't provide funding on a rapid base, front loaded, if I'm asking somebody to make something, they better be able to buy the steel. They better be able to do the tooling, and they better be able to get up to speed. Now, a foreman in a garage doesn't have that kind of ready funds. So we need to make sure that our contracts are front loaded with materials costs so that people don't have to take out loans in order to complete a contract.
Yep.
And we've done some things specific to our Spartan program that actually facilitate that. I know that DIU has done some things to try and front load those so that it doesn't become a burden to work with the government, right? And taking away that burden is really important, because that is the culture shift. That's part of the culture shift that Alex has talked about.
Yeah, so that's really good, because we do have lots of concern in startups about cash flow, and so that need is recognized and being addressed is really important to enabling these companies to be comfortable with moving forward with the military, that they don't risk their entire business in doing so. In terms of the magnitude of that, it seemed like for a while I was always hearing $50 million. That was a kind of a magic number somewhere. Talk about the way this funding flows and how a successful startup, would then shift into a more traditional acquisition process. And who's got a thought? Art?
So from our side, because, and I'll talk about our program as it exists right now. We are doing the SBIR route. Typically, a phase one, we introduce a problem. We already have a sponsor behind it who's going to carry it across. In a phase one, you're looking at $150,000. That's a round number, of which we get most of that to you within the first 30 days of the contract, so that you can go out and you can produce an idea, a specification, maybe even an early sample to prove the point. Upon successfully categorizing that, we may have a few hundred people who apply. We take in 15. Okay, of those 15 going to a phase two, it's a whittle down process. The sponsors of the project say, we like these particular ones best. They seem to serve our needs the best. We whittle those down and rinse, wash, repeat, but the money goes up to a couple $1 million in order for the performance on that. And then when you move to a phase three, that's early testing, that's fielding it, that's getting it out there. This whole process, guess what, can be about 3 years, right? Which crosses to the point where now, if you've got the sponsor, if you've got those people there, you're ready to move into a budgeted acquisition.
And so that budgeted acquisition would be?
That would be negotiating with Big Army.
Yeah. Okay. So we're back to the federal acquisition regulations.
Exactly. Then you run into FAR.
Okay.
Yeah, it always comes down back to that. I mean, that's just a great point. I love it that OTAs and SBIRs are a way to get in the door, but at some point we have to do the work to then get it into, said, big Navy, big Army, big Air Force, to cross the bridge. And I think all of our organizations have said we actively do that for you. That's, and that's why we have these connections and these networks and stay on good comms with our resource sponsors and the Congress and the program managers on the PEO side, the big acquisition side, to make it work. Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, and I agree. And just to piggyback there, DIU's mission really is to accelerate, commercial adoption. Right, to get more people a part of the national security innovation base to participate in this, right? Whether it's advanced energy and material and new battery technologies, right? Microelectronics, space, the ability to go beyond just the 5 defense contractors that we have, by which, even, Amazon in their increase in R&D could literally buy the entire defense industrial base and shut it down if they wanted to. The ability to support, and by the way, the defense primes are hugely critical and the backbone, right, of being able to support us. But a lot of these game-changing technologies, to be able to bring them to bear, are fantastic, right? We want to be able to transform capabilities and capacity throughout the nation, right? And strengthen national security innovation base by bringing in non-traditional problem solvers from academia and industry, and that's where ENSIGN comes in. And if you're a company or you're a business idea and you're starting relatively early on, look, there's $2.5 billion in small business innovation research. It is really the angels, seed funding of the nation. They actually call themselves, it's the angel investing of the DoD. It's the largest pot. If you're working on game-changing transformational capabilities, basic fundamental applied research, DARPA or our service labs are right for you. ENSIGN to do boot camps, hackathons, right? Hacking for defense, working with, our academia to be able to develop those ideas, right? The Naval Tech Bridge, right? A lot of the stuff that's happening in the 75th Innovation Command, right? All of those kind of is the early adoption, technology readiness level 1 through 5, basically from bar napkin to, hey, we believe it's a thing. Then we have National Security Innovation Capital, which is our own funding, right? To be able to, in part, bridge that valley where you're at a TR level 5, many technologies, especially in the hardware space, are just not invested in. And so NSIC, the National Security Innovation Capital under DIU, takes game-changing bets in companies that we feel can be transformative, that are very hardware specific. This was the first year that we got funded and was $15 million. And given how things are developing, I expect that to rapidly increase over the next couple of years. That being said, on the very end, DIU, we have our own organic capability just within DIU to be able to, right, at the end of the day, accelerate technology, make it easier for customers and those programs of record, right, to find this technology and help them, bridge that valley of the shadow of death to all of the joint forces. So if Naval X creates something impactful, or Army Applications Lab, or AFWorks, or any of our services create a new novel program using their small business innovation research or a game-changing technology, DIU really comes into play to help scale that across the joint forces. So I mean, it is a partnership that we have to collaborate together, a part of this innovation ecosystem.
And in that partnership, that really is important. I know that we all kind of reach out to each other. Every one of us have talked, and we're in different areas of the world. Well, Alex and I are both in Texas, but we're in different parts of the world, right? And we talk to each other on a regular basis to make sure that, we are kept abreast of what's going on. Hey, I'm looking for this. Hey, I'm looking for that. So getting in touch with us is the greatest way to start your journey and become a part of our solver group. But it still comes down to, we are the organizations that have invested the time and resource to develop alternative funding methods to get people across that valley of death. If it does end up being, 4 years until you're a part of the budget, there are alternative funding that we're chasing, that we're making sure is there. You might go from a SBIR 1 directly to a SBIR 3, and then get a 3B, and then get OT until you're able to get on. Because if the soldiers in the field say that they need it, we're providing it to some of them, I can tell you that they'll all ask for it. Once somebody sees value, it's really good to get it out there. And especially if you're working with some of the programs that we do, we have specific CFTs, whether they be in navigation, position, and timing, whether they be in synthetic training, soldier lethality, large vehicles, electrification, what have you. All these topics, all these great things that we're seeing happening out in the world, we're trying to key into them and find the best of the best so that we're solving problems today. Yes, it might not fully get fielded for a couple of years, but the problems that we're solving for tomorrow, maybe we'll get a little faster, and then we'll get a little faster. And as we create this culture change, we're going to shorten that time frame, right? Because we are making that cultural change. That's what Ben is doing. That's what Alex is doing. That's what the Air Force is doing. We're shortening that runway to be able to take technology directly from the real goal would be directly from development to in a soldier's hands, so that it can be effective and it can be timely.
And so those tranches of funding that you described aren't necessarily just for development or prototypes, but they're actually also into what in industry would be called production, but might be called deployment in the military.
Call it initial deployment. Call it initial fielding, as opposed to permanent fielding. Initial fielding, where yes, it's still being tested a little bit, but it is being put into operational use.
Yeah, the great piece, and the same thing that Naval X does, with their SBIR dollars, and same thing with the Air Force and the Army. Look, from SBIR, from that initial prototype, you can actually go right into a phase 3 production contract. You keep your intellectual property. You can be sole sourced, which is non-trivial within the DoD because everything is competitive. But the fact that they went through a competitive SBIR process and they won, they can go right into a production contract. Same thing with the OTA. You can, once you win go through the CSO process and win a contract via the OTA authority on a prototype, you can go right into a production thereafter. And this also helps, accelerate and finding pathways through that valley of the shadow of death, and bridging the gap between what we have now to go, not having to recompete, continuing the development that we have. Our motto is, let's buy what we can and build what we must.
Yeah.
Okay, and then a little bit of the decoder ring for our audience who may not be live in this space. ENSIGN is the National Security Innovation Network. You can find them with Google and understand what they do. I don't think we want to elaborate on it here for sake of time. And then we heard about CFTs, and this is as far as I know, kind of a unique structure within the Army Futures Command, of which the Army Application Lab is a part, a cross-functional team organized around a specific problem or topic area. And what are the functions that are crossed in a cross-functional team?
So that's it's a good question, and it's one that's actually kind of difficult to answer, because when you talk large groups like position, navigation, and timing, right? That's everything from a nuclear clock to aiming systems to GPS to technology denied positioning to, and it just goes broad. You start talking soldier lethality. Is that a weapon? Is that a life-saving device? So the reason that we call it a cross-functional team, it's a team that specifically looks at problems and says, okay, we're a group that can cover this, right? And it pulls from various areas of Army expertise so that you are getting a problem that's viable. And I do want to say something about that. This is one of the things that I think that as the DoD that we became very comfortable with for years was releasing a specification that says, I want a can that's 4 inches across, 18 inches high, filled with fire suppressant dust, that when I pull the handle, it comes out. We're one of the issues that we work on is going back to the people who have issues and saying, hey, just tell me there's a fire, right? Why is the fire a problem? Okay, now let the solvers who have the creative mindsets go out and solve the problem instead of meeting the specification. Does that make sense? Or meeting the I shouldn't say specification, I should say requirement, because Army requirements can be pages and pages long for the smallest thing.
Yeah, I know.
No, exactly. Starting with the problem, now with the requirements.
Yes.
As I've read, I've often found that what I've read in traditional military procurements has been a specification for the solution, and the information on the problem being solved has all been distilled out.
Yes.
And so it makes it very hard to have that context. And so providing the problem specification, then maybe with hints on the style of solution desired, does sound like a superior approach.
Well, hints are great, Pete, but I'll tell you what, it was eye-opening in some of our first cohort style environments to take people out into the field and fire a howitzer and have them turn around and say, well, there's your problem. And it was something that hadn't been identified, right? It was something that actually solved the problem, but was not identified as the preferred solution up front, right? So sometimes we don't know that it's a piece of paper that's a problem. Obviously, it's the breach, or it's something mechanical, but it can be something as simple as inventory management. It can be something as simple as process. And that's the advantage of getting fresh eyes from, quite frankly, the most brilliant people on earth, the industry of solvers, to come in and say, okay, you didn't see it, but we do.
And I find, Naval X is great at that. AFWERX, Army Application Lab, being able to work with their particular military members and to do this creative thinking, to understand really what is the root of what we are trying to solve. And then putting it out to industry what the problem is, versus just asking for a faster horse, knowing that we're just trying to get from point A to point B.
Terrific. Well, in the very few minutes that we have left here, I wanted to ask kind of a question on engagement. There's the broad agency announcements, BAAs, that get published, which is the escape vehicle where these solicitations for SBIR or other programs come out from the U.S. government. Tend to be the focus point for startup companies. It's, oh, terrific. There's a BAA, there's an SBIR, it's got some money, and I have something that would fit. Let's go. And I've got 30 or 60 days to respond. It seems like there ought to be engagement before that there ought to be a way for a company to understand and interact with the military, build the relationships that I think Alex talked about earlier, prior to that solicitation hitting the street. And I'm just curious, real quickly, how a company would go about being and staying engaged with the DoD so that as the solicitations come out, they're in a position to respond effectively.
I'll go ahead and I'll start it off.
Great.
That, for one, it's just find the nearest tech bridge and reach out is one. Or if you don't have a tech bridge nearby, reach out to Naval X, and building it's relationships, right? Mm-hmm. And the more we understand what you're doing, the more when we hear a problem set can go, wait a minute, let me talk to some of these folks that might have a solution. And the second is, that's why we built the digital engagement platform, is we want you to engage there. We have BAAs, but we have the communities of interest, where you can go on there, and then we see you and can interact with you and build a relationship before the problem set even comes out. Those are my 2 cents.
Terrific. Ben, Art, do you have a comment on that? So
we are actively going out and engaging with industry. The hard thing, and I think both my compatriots here will agree with, is that there are legal ramifications for telling something to someone before it's released, as in nobody gets the money, it gets pulled back, or if it gets challenged. It's called giving them unfair advantage. So we have to be careful about that. We do investigate industries, we do reach out, and quite frankly, one of the places we reach into, very similar to what Naval X has, we have some digital engagement in terms of a BAA that is on our site. You might not get chosen for the BAA, but quite frankly, if you have a solution that you've documented to the BAA that's close to one of our SBIR problems, we're going to mail you about it when the SBIR is released. You can also, quite frankly, watch our website at aal.army, another plug, and we do post up all of our SBIRs, but even beyond that, art at aal.army. I talk to everyone. I even talk to these guys. I'll talk to everyone because, quite frankly, the more we know about the industry, the more we can help shape where the problems are coming from, the more we can shape, who gets involved in them and get the best applicants in.
Terrific. Alex, I don't want to leave you off, but I only have about 30 seconds. Can you go?
The short of the long is, things like DARPA, they actually do an abstract. They actually do a open solicitation and let everybody else know. They actually have a little bit of a conference to really dissect the problem. And then people can actually submit an abstract. And from that abstract, they can go, hey, before you do this long BAA, 30-page proposal, hey, we'll let you know whether you're close enough to fitting the bill or you're just wasting your time. DIU does a very similar thing, but we only require a 15-page slide deck. So from that 15-page slide deck, we're able to provide some recommendations and some guidance before we down select from there. So it's a very low barrier to entry, setting expectations, being able to provide quick feedback and move at the speed of business instead of taking months at a time to do a solicitation.
Speed of business. I love it. Gentlemen, you've been very generous with your time here today. We need to yield the floor to the next session. I look forward to engaging further with you, as I'm sure our entrepreneurs do. Thank you again.
A pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much.